Dear colleagues, my name is Ieva Brence. Here I represent research from Latvia, performed together with my colleagues Ilona Beizitere and Biruta Sloka. And our topic is on public financial support for micro enterprises in the COVID-19 crisis situation. So the work is performed and supported by the National Research Program Interframe and the National Research Program Project Recovery, LV. Today we are also touching the issue of relevance of the topic because, as we know, the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 had many unexpected challenges for business and also for governments and for policymakers. And these parties were forced to change the predetermined operating strategy rapidly. And also the recent theoretical analysis proves that actually, COVID-19 has encouraged business financials to look for new types and directions of financial support. Therefore, also our aim of the study was to find out the reaction of state by promoting the availability of public financial support in the form of financial instruments for micro enterprises. And micro enterprises is the biggest proportion also of SMEs in Latvia. Small and medium-sized enterprises form 99% of all the enterprises in Latvia, and therefore this research is targeted to the bigger majority of all the companies represented in Latvia. And the main tasks of the research were to investigate the availability of public funding for micro enterprises and to elaborate solutions offered for companies to overcome the difficulties caused by the negative effects of COVID-19. Of course, we have performed theoretical analysis involving more than 30 literature sources for this present paper. And the main theoretical aspects that we have found also concerning before crisis period was that regardless of age, firm size significantly affects the probability of using specific foreign investments, financial instruments. Also, medium-sized enterprises are more likely than small firms to be internally financed and less likely to rely on state-subsidized financial instruments. Also, micro enterprises appear to have difficulties to receive grants or subsidized loans, mostly due to the basic financing that they cannot provide. And also, SMEs report lack of public support, which can negatively impact access to finance options and development and use of alternative financial instruments. Therefore, our methodology for the research by investigating the situation in frames of the COVID-19 was to perform interviews with representatives of financial institutions, financial experts, and financial donors, and also to perform survey of Latvian entrepreneurs. So we had an online questionnaire and more than 1,800 enterprises participate. And also the main information that was involved in the survey was that out of all 1,869 micro enterprises surveyed, they indicated the following support. 4% were using public support loan, 6% EU funds financing, 1% EU venture capital funds and business angels, 3% bank loan with public support guarantees, and also the traditional sources like bank loans, credits, overdraft, leasing, and etc. were used in 26 cases. And surprisingly, but large proportion of these micro enterprises, they relied solely on internal funding. Although half of the micro enterprises actually needed new or additional funding. And therefore, taking into account these preliminary research results, we also went on analyzing the theory and how it complies with our research. Main findings out of the theory were the following: that most of negatively affected companies will be particular micro enterprises in the COVID-19. So these are the enterprises with less than 10 employees and low growth for ambition. Also, the smallest entrepreneurs, as their business size is relatively small, are in the highest risk category of losing their job. And also importance of internal money savings and insufficient cash flow. For example, in the United States, 37 of companies would not be able to survive a pandemic for less than a month, while 24% could survive without assistance for only 2 months. This is what we saw, that actually we need to target and we need to provide financial instruments to the micro enterprises. And what we also found out from our survey is that main reasons why business owners do not use financial instruments are lack of awareness, how to obtain financial instruments. Yes, and this is actually case of 75% of surveyed respondents. So quite big number. Also insufficient preparation, yes, of assessment in order to request financing, and not required for enterprise development. So only 5% of the companies investigated provided an answer that actually they are not requiring additional funds for enterprise development. Yes, and in 3% of cases, company wanted to develop on the basis of its own resources. 1% of the micro enterprises also noted that there is a huge bureaucracy, yes, and sorts of ideas, therefore they are probably also not interested to use financial instruments. Our survey was in line with also Krabbe-Half's coefficient. So for internal consistency, we included 13 items, and the Krabbe-Half coefficient was 0.823. So comparatively big figure, and this is therefore we are pretending to share the findings of the survey. What we see is that actually the survey of Latvian enterprises, covering more than 1,800 cases, showed the types of financing used already before the crisis period, so for the years 2015 and 2017. And these figures actually were quite similar to the ones that we saw also in the previous slides on the financing targets that the companies are using now. So 1% used venture capital and business angels, 3% used autumn guaranteed bank loans, also 4% used autumn loans, and 6% used EU funds. Moreover, 26% use traditional sources like bank loans, credit lines, overdrafts, leasings, and etc. And 64% of the micro enterprises in Latvia relied solely on internal financing. Therefore, taking into account the calculations that we had, and the few of them we presented also in this presentation, but the main conclusions that we have drawn also out of our research is that public financial support measures for companies have been developed, are available and offered to micro enterprises, yet they are not always fully used. And this is what we find the challenge, really, to start using more the possibilities that micro enterprises actually have. Also, support measures are based on recommendations of European institutions. Yes, extension of liabilities, loan guarantees, and direct loans of SMEs, particular micro enterprises, but their willingness and ability to use the support offered is debatable. Again, we come to the main point that still actually the money and the funds are available, but there is still a lot of communication to be done to encourage the micro enterprises to use all the financing possible. And a survey of companies showed that in recent years, among micro enterprises, financial instruments with public support have not been popular. Yes, and as we know, more than 60% of companies relied more on internal sources of financing. And as the conclusions that we have drawn is that the practice of other countries shows that other forms of direct and indirect support are possible, which combined with financial support instruments could lead to better results in reducing the impact of the coronavirus. And also, of course, Latvia should work more on targeting this financing. Currently, Latvia has not developed a special venture capital offer combining public and private investments for micro enterprises, including those in the startup phases. But this is the way that we are performing, and therefore, hopefully, soon the mechanism will be in place. Taking into account the research, we have driven a number of policy recommendations. First, we really consider that modifications or additions to existing government financial support schemes for micro enterprises and startups are needed in line with the characteristics of companies. Also, specific financial support instruments, for example, innovate and create new possibilities like hide for unknown fields of activity and products in order to survive are necessary, and also the necessity to renew the training programs is in place. Mostly, yes, also not only to retrain the redundant workers, but also provides them with business planning and financial advice. Currently, these training programs are in place, but obviously not to the extent that they are necessary, and especially concerning the financial issues. This is also the goal to start encouraging the micro enterprises to believe in their potential of attracting finance. In short, this was the general concept of our research. I thank you for your attention. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. You saw our email addresses in the title slide. Thank you. And